scripture reading for this morning comes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 8, verses 6 through 19. Keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him, because the Lord your God is bringing you to a wonderful land, a land with streams of water, springs, and wells that gush up in the valleys and on the hills, a land of wheat and barley, vines, fig trees, and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food without any shortage. You won't lack a thing. A land where stone is as hard as iron, and where you will mine copper from the hills. You will eat, and you will be satisfied, and you will bless the Lord your God in the wonderful land he's given you. But watch yourself. Don't forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commands or his case laws or his regulations that I'm commanding you right now. When you eat, when you get full, when you build nice houses, when you settle down, and when your herds and your flocks are growing large, when your silver and gold are multiplying and everything you have is thriving, don't become arrogant, forgetting the Lord your God, the one who rescued you from Egypt, from the house of slavery, the one who led you through this vast and terrifying desert of poisonous snakes and scorpions, of cracked ground with no water, the one who made water flow for you out of a hard rock, the one who fed you manna in the wilderness, which your ancestors had never experienced, in order to humble and to test you, but in order to do good to you in the end. Don't think to yourself, my own strength and abilities have produced this prosperity for me. Remember the Lord your God. He's the one who gives you the strength to be prosperous in order to establish the covenant he made with your ancestors. And that's how things stand right now. But if you do, in fact, forget the Lord your God and follow other gods, serving and bowing down to them, I swear to you right now that you will be completely destroyed. The word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. So I had the privilege of joining, just for the very beginning, the United Women of Faith retreat yesterday morning. And everyone asked me how my trip went. I said it was great. And they were like, how you feeling? I was like, I'm feeling a lot better. I'll share about that in a minute. I was like, but I haven't finished my sermon yet. And they said, just tell us about your vacation. And that's so sweet and so kind, and I will, yes, I will. But I promise you it will transition into the sermon. But we did, as Auden sort of spoiled earlier, we flew out 2 weeks ago tonight to Iceland. And the first thing that greeted us when we got off the plane in Iceland was a Sbarro. So, you know, they make you feel at home right when you get off the plane. We did not eat it because it was 6 o'clock in the morning, but, you know, it was nice and comforting. But that first day we went out and our kids saw snow for the first time. And so there's them in their snowsuits, and they loved it. They did not care one lick about the weather. And actually, we had the most amazing weather. I almost don't even want to go back to Iceland ever again because it can't top what we had. The weather was upper 30s, low 40s. It was sunny. The main thing is there was no wind. It's normally like constant 30-mile-per-hour winds, even higher during storms. You know you have good wind when all the guides are taking pictures at all of your stops. They've been there a million times, but they enjoyed being out in the snow. And so we explored Reykjavik, which is the capital of Iceland. We visited a big Lutheran church. You can see it sort of in the background of the second picture, but that first one, that's their baptismal font, and it's made to look like ice, which I think is just really cool. And then we took a family photo on the famous Rainbow Road in downtown Reykjavik. And then the beginning of last week's announcement video, I greeted you from the top of a glacier, but we didn't just go on it, we actually got to go in it. So we went hiking through an ice cave, or I should say Kara, Auden, and I went hiking through an ice cave, and Brooks got to ride a sled that we got to pull through the ice cave. So that's us there going through the ice cave. And then on the right side, we got to go meet and feed some Icelandic horses. They are small, don't call them ponies. They get very mad at you if you call them ponies. They are very low to the ground because of that wind. Everything in Iceland is low to the ground because of the wind. The only native trees grow to this height. They have a joke that if you get lost in Icelandic forest, stand up. We then also toured lots of waterfalls. Everything you see in the background is a waterfall. That's Auden and I. We climbed like 60,000 stairs to get up there and take that picture with all the waterfalls. And then we went to the southern coast and visited the black sand beaches and climbed up on the hexagonal basalt rock cliffs, and that was a lot of fun. And then, of course, our number one goal was to see the northern lights. And actually, the amazing weather during the day impeded our ability to see the northern lights at night because it was so sunny, relatively still, relatively warm. Ice and snow would melt during the day, kind of get up in the atmosphere, and then when it cooled down at night, it formed fog. So the first night, we didn't see anything at all. The second and third nights, we just saw smudges of green through the clouds. But then the very last night, the weather cleared, and for over an hour, it went from one horizon to the next. And I mean, like, I don't even know. I could literally show you an hour's worth of videos and photos, but just like, I'll tell you, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I believe in science. I'm married to a scientist, but I still needed to see the sky turn green to believe it actually happens. It happens. And it's definitely, this like super cheesy, but I mean, this is my job. That's just one of those moments where you go, God is just so amazing and so creative. And then we flew over to England and went and spent a couple days in the Cotswolds, which is kind of a rural sheep country. Think like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings style buildings. We spent a day out at a farm, which was amazing, meeting local wildlife. There's Brooks saying hi to a giant bunny. Yes, that sheep has 4 horns. That's just how they grow them in certain parts of the UK. We got to feed a lot of the animals and do amazing things out there at the farm. Then in the town we were in, Stow-in-the-Wold, we got to visit this church that has these 2 massive trees that have basically grown into the front door. Are there any Lord of the Rings fans here? Did anyone recognize this? This inspired Tolkien to write that one particular door that has the trees around it. We got to visit that. And then we spent our last couple of days in London, and Auden's, the top of her bucket list was to ride the London Eye. And so that's us on the London Eye with Big Ben in the background. And we just had an amazing trip all around. And there was only one bummer, really, of the whole thing. And that was that Brooks got a stomach bug right at the end. And the reason that it's just Auden and I in that picture is because Kara and her mom and Brooks were back at the apartment, and he was puking everywhere. And then he puked again on the plane, and then he puked again when he got home. And then right as I got home from that day out with Auden, I also got it. So I destroyed an airport bathroom. And then I got on like a 10-hour flight. My wife is so embarrassed right now. She's literally sinking down in her chair. And then I got to spend a 9-hour flight drinking only water while everyone around me is having tea and crumpets and strawberries and cream and ice cream and sandwiches. Like, it was the worst flight of my life. But if that was all that it was, it was an amazing trip. But because he kept puking, we did have to go to the pediatrician, and she used the word norovirus, so I Googled that, and it turns out it's up 90% in London. It was big here in the fall. I know some of our kids had it here. It's super contagious, and there's probably not a whole lot that we could have done to prevent it. At the same time, I will admit that as the vacation went on smoothly and no one was getting sick, I started to let my guard down. Anyone do this? You've got all those amazing, you're washing your hands constantly at the beginning, you're wiping down everything at the beginning, but then you start to feel at home. Now, a little bit of it is second kid syndrome, right? The first one's wrapped in bubble wrap, the second one eats dirt, and you go, that's so cute, right? But the vacation is just so smooth and everyone's healthy, and so we start using hand sanitizer instead of washing hands. Well, guess what? Hand sanitizer does nothing to norovirus. It just laughs at hand sanitizer. And then at the farm, they had this amazing playground. How do we not let our kids play on the playground at the farm? Then sometimes you just forget, and then I'll admit, at least for me, I get lazy. When I'm picking up the pacifier for the 70th time that hour, I might just lick it off and give it back. Here's where we turn to the sermon part. We are oftentimes really motivated to do the right thing during hard times. When things are tight, when the future is uncertain, when it feels like things aren't going our way and we want to try to right the ship. And of course, even during that time, we can get tired of doing the right things. But how many of you know it's also really a lot easier to abandon good habits when things are going well? Right? There's that old famous illustration of the guy that throws his umbrella away because he never gets wet when it rains, forgetting that it's the umbrella that was keeping him dry. Well, 5 of the 6 themes here in Lent are going to make a lot of sense. We've already talked about chaos and about change, and some of the upcoming topics are regret and waiting and abandonment, and then on Easter, God leading us through death to new life. But today might seem a little odd. We're going to talk about our need for God to lead us through the good times. It may seem odd because we might think like, well, if it's good times, then do I really need God as much? Maybe just like asking for it to continue. Or we might ask the question like, if times are good, doesn't that mean God is with me? So doesn't that mean I'm already doing the right things? And if you think about it, you might not go that far. You might be someone who says and believes truly that we do need God in all seasons of life. But if you think about your practices, when are you more committed to praying? When things are good or when things are difficult? When do you tend to search the scriptures more? When you need comfort or when you're comfortable? When you need direction or where it seems like the next step is clear? When does coming to church to connect with God and the community feel most needed? But as we start to think through this, I think it leads us to discover 2 false assumptions. And number 1 is that our relationship with God and the spiritual disciplines or actions that we take are primarily about our need. Like we're in relationship with God and we do all these things because we need God. And certainly we need God. But in a way that kind of turns God into a spiritual vending machine, right? And our prayer and our scripture reading and attending worship into the tokens that we put in the machine. Like if I do the right things and I punch in the right code, then the right thing will drop out of the vending machine. Rather than seeing our relationship with God as the point, and then God's blessings and meeting our needs as the fruit of a healthy relationship with God. I mean, think about the most important relationships in your life. Whether it's a good friend or a spouse or your kids, like you're not in relationship with them because of the things they give you. You're in relationship with them because you love them, and then you give them things because you love them, and then they reciprocate because they love you. The second false assumption may be that good times or success or abundance and flourishing are actually a destination. An end point that we can eventually get to. I work my way into success. I work my way into a good season. The implication being that it's some state that we can achieve and then hopefully maintain. Now, I'm sure we all know and understand that good times can end, and sometimes it's out of our control. But we begin to think of good times as like defending a castle. If I can get inside the walls and build the walls thick enough and high enough, I can keep out all the things and I can stay in the good times. But I just don't think that good times are a destination. They're not a place that we get. They're a gift that God gives us as we continue this journey called life. And I also just want to sort of tangentially clarify that the good times are also not earned. God doesn't give us good times because we do all the right things. And if you're facing a challenge in life, it's not because you're necessarily doing the wrong things or experiencing punishment. Some of that is just the experience of life. But I want to walk through some stories in the Bible that challenge these assumptions and hopefully reframe for us our perspective. And we'll start with that passage we read in Deuteronomy chapter 8. This is toward the end of Moses' life. So Moses has had the burning bush moment. He's gone and led the people out through the Red Sea. There's a big through moment. And then they get to Mount Sinai. They get the 10 Commandments. They get the law. They enter into covenant to become the people of God. Then they wander their way to the edge of the promised land. And as we talked about a few weeks ago, they get nervous about all of the nations living in the promised land, so they don't trust God and they don't go in. And God says, okay, you're going to wander in the desert for 40 years until the unfaithful generation has passed away. Well, now we're at the end of that time, and they are about to go in for real, but even Moses is not going in. He himself has committed a sin and has had unfaithfulness to the degree where he will not enter. But he's still their leader at this moment, and he wants to try to prepare this new generation to trust God in a way that his generation didn't. So he tells them what's coming. The Lord your God is bringing you to a wonderful land, a land with streams of water, springs and wells that gush up in the valleys and on the hills, the land of wheat and barley, figs, vines, fig trees, and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food without any shortage. You won't lack a thing there. A land where stone is as hard as iron and where you will mine copper from the hills. You will eat, you will be satisfied, and you will bless the Lord your God in the wonderful land that he's given you. Basically, you're about to have everything. Not just everything you've ever needed. You're about to have everything you've ever wanted. The good life is just over that horizon. And this makes it sound like a destination, right? It is the promised land. If we can just get into the promised land, then we'll be in the good times. But I actually sort of started halfway through a sentence to make it sound static. But it's actually not. Here's how the passage actually begins. Keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him, because the Lord your God is bringing you into a wonderful land. You see, it's not the land itself that generates the blessing. It's walking with God. It is being on the journey with God, keeping his commands. It's an ongoing thing that activates the good life. But Moses also knows human nature, right? He's led this group of people for 40 years. If any of you have even overseen a group of people for 40 hours, or you've spent 40 hours with yourself, you know human nature tends to rear its head. And so he warns them, but watch yourself. Don't forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commands or his case laws or his regulations that I'm commanding you right now. When you eat, when you get full, when you build nice houses, when you settle down, when your herds and your flocks are growing large, when your silver and gold are multiplying, when everything you have is thriving, don't become arrogant, forgetting the Lord your God. It is so nice to settle into comfort and abundance. There's a writer I know who said, yeah, it's true that money doesn't buy happiness, but money can provide the conditions for happiness, right? When some of that stress is relieved, we can get comfortable and we can start to let our guard down. And when things are going well, monetarily or otherwise, when relationships are going well, when our health is going well, we can begin to stop doing the things that got us there. And we begin to think that it's just going to go on forever. And that just really resonates with me because I feel like that's a message our culture feeds us all the time. It's kind of like you to achieve the American dream, just work hard enough and then you're going to get to a point where life gets easy. Just chase harder, just work harder, just save more. And yeah, of course, be smart, invest your money wisely, take advantage of all the opportunities that you have, but we have to remember that the number in our bank account very rarely correlates to how happy we actually are. One of the blessings and challenges of being a pastor is hearing stories that are heavy and sad. And how many times have I heard stories of people who their most successful season of life was actually their most stressful, their most anxious, and honestly their most lonely, because all their energy was around amassing and protecting. And Moses is pleading with the people to see that it's actually the walking with God that makes everything else matter. It's also what makes it possible. He says, don't forget God, the one who rescued you from Egypt, the one who led you through the desert, the one who made water flow, the one who fed you with manna, the one who ultimately wanted to do good for you in the end. All of this abundance, it's God's doing. But of course, when we forget this, when we get comfortable in our little kingdoms, who do we begin to credit? Ourselves. Don't think to yourself, my own strength and abilities have produced all this prosperity for me. Remember the Lord your God. He's the one who gave you the strength to be prosperous in order to establish the covenant he made with your ancestors. And that's how things stand right now. God is the one that gives all of us life. God is the one that gave us the mind, the heart, the body, the coordination, the sense of humor, the analytical mind, the strength, the speed. God is the one that gave you your people skills. And yes, of course, we develop those skills. And yes, of course, we apply them. And yes, of course, we work hard. And yes, of course, our effort matters. How many times do I take us back to the first 3 pages of the Bible to see that God created us and gave us work to do? And that work matters. And if we don't do that work, it matters. But the Bible seems to clearly believe that too often we forget the gift, we forget the giver, and we begin to credit ourselves. We make it through the good times when we walk with God in humility and gratitude. And that leads us to another story, one that looks like it's going to be the ultimate example of walking through the good times, and that's the story of Solomon. Solomon was Israel's 3rd king. So we had Saul, that didn't go so well, so he got removed. He was followed up by who? Little shepherd boy, Solomon's dad, David. David becomes king. And then he has his son Solomon, who's going to take over the throne. And everything is set up so well for Solomon. Israel is largely at peace. They are prosperous. Towards the end of his life, David says, I want to build you a temple. And God says, you're not going to do it. Solomon's going to do it. That is not only an amazing responsibility, but that's an incredible honor to get to be the king that builds the temple where God is going to reside. And then when he becomes king, God says to Solomon, I will give you whatever you ask for. And what does Solomon ask for? Wisdom. He's got that humility. He doesn't ask for the riches and the power. And in fact, God says, because you ask for wisdom, I'm going to give you wisdom, but I'm also going to give you the riches and the power that you didn't ask for because of your humility. He's portrayed as the wisest person that has ever lived. And under Solomon, Israel is incredibly prosperous. It's not simply at peace. It becomes basically a hub for world trade. Solomon sees and takes advantage of all these relationships. Foreign leaders come to see his riches and to hear his wisdom. And he begins to make deals all across the world, which only increases his wealth. And there's a problem, though. What looks like the ultimate sign of success, what seems incredibly wise to everybody else, was actually the opposite of what God wanted the king to do. There's another passage in Deuteronomy where through Moses, God is telling the people, someday you're going to ask for a king. And I'm going to let you have a king, but I'm going to tell you a few things about what the king should and shouldn't do. The king must not acquire too many horses, and he must not return the people to Egypt in order to acquire more horses, because the Lord told you, you will never go back by that road again. The king must not take numerous wives so that his heart doesn't go astray. Nor can the king acquire too much silver and gold. Well, guess what? Solomon does all of those things. In fact, this list is so strangely specific that there are some biblical scholars who believe this list was added in later by people after Solomon who say, we don't do that, and we never should have done that. And in fact, this text follows up with, here's what you should do, King of Israel. Number 1, you should go to the priests, bring a piece of paper and a pen, and write down everything I just said about what you shouldn't do. It's basically like the oath of office. You need to prove to everyone that you know what you're not supposed to do. And then God says, keep it with you at all times and read it every day. Why would the king need to read this every day? To be reminded of what not to do. But very clearly, Solomon doesn't do this. Here's what happened. In addition to Pharaoh's daughter, King Solomon loved many foreign women. They came from the nations that the Lord had commanded the Israelites, don't intermarry with them. They will definitely turn your heart toward their gods. But Solomon clung to these women in love. He had 700 royal wives and 300 secondary wives, and they turned his heart. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods. And let's just stop for a minute and stop blaming all the wives. I think Solomon had something to do with this too. He wasn't committed to the Lord his God with all his heart, as was his father David. And it goes on to say that he built shrines for foreign gods in and around Jerusalem. And he went to them to worship. This is the best possible good times and the worst possible outcome. It does not matter how much you have. It does not matter how well things are going. It does not matter how well you think you understand how life works. It does not matter how much control you think you have. Solomon may have had more control over his life than any person at any point in human history. Remember, page 3 of the Bible, wanting to call their own shots was Adam and Eve's sin, not just simply eating a piece of fruit that God said no to. It's almost as if this is the fundamental temptation and the fundamental characteristic of our brokenness is a desire for us to define what's right and what's wrong rather than looking to God. But it doesn't have to go poorly. There are examples of those who handle it well, and the one we'll look at is Joseph. Joseph was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, also known as Israel. But let's also be honest, Joseph was the annoying little brother. He was his father's favorite. He got lots of special privileges. You probably know about his special coat. He also had all these dreams about everyone else bowing down to him, and the dude told everyone else those dreams. You know, someday you guys are going to be bowing down to me. How do you think that went over? Well, one day his brothers are off doing business, and his dad sends him to check up on them, little tattletale. And what do? They sell him into slavery and fake his death, and he ends up down in Egypt. But God uses him to bring abundance to the house of his master. God blesses Joseph in what Joseph does in his master's house. His master becomes wildly wealthy. While the master's wife gets the hots for him, tries to sleep with him, he says no. She gets mad and probably embarrassed and accuses him of assault, and he gets arrested. And after languishing in prison for a few years, his God-given talent of interpreting dreams lands him in front of Pharaoh. And he interprets a dream that foretells that there will be 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine. And for whatever reason, Pharaoh decides to put Joseph in charge of managing the next 14 years. Then Joseph assumed control of the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he began to serve Pharaoh, Egypt's king. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. He collected all of the food during the 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt and stored the food in cities. In each city, he stored the food from the fields surrounding it. Joseph amassed grain like the sand of the sea. There was so much that he stopped trying to measure it because it was beyond measuring. And then the famine hits. But now Egypt has more than it could ever need. They have abundance because God has used Joseph to bring this abundance. And word gets out and people start coming from all over the known world to buy food. And who are some of the people that come to buy food? His brothers, the ones who sold him into slavery. And at this moment, Joseph has an opportunity, doesn't he? They don't recognize him. It's been a long time and he's now dressed up like Pharaoh himself. They don't recognize him. Joseph has an opportunity here to either use all of this abundance for good or to use it for his own personal revenge. Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me," and they moved closer. And he said, "I'm your brother Joseph, the one you sold to Egypt. Now don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves that you sold me here. Actually, God sent me before you to save lives. We've already had 2 years of famine in the land, and there are 5 years left without planting or harvesting. God sent me before you to make sure that you'd survive and to rescue your lives in this amazing way. You didn't send me here. It was God who made me a father to Pharaoh, master of his entire household, and ruler of the whole land of Egypt. Now hurry, go back to our father. Tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master of all Egypt. Come down to me. Don't delay." And here's the last piece of the puzzle. We've talked about the need for humility and gratitude, and we can certainly see that in Joseph's life. I mean, what's different about what he's saying versus the way Solomon's life ended up? This man stayed connected to God. Joseph adds to it generosity. He had all the power. He had God-given control over an immense amount of resources. And he chose to share it, even with those who had deeply and personally wronged him. Why? Because he was walking with God through the good times. He saw God's presence and activity throughout his story, and he never forgot how he got where he was and who was ultimately responsible. Humility, gratitude, and generosity mark the lives of those who walk with God through the good times. Now, I want to leave you today with another psalm, just like I did in week 1. I don't know if I'll do it every week, but it made sense then. It makes sense today. Although, again, today's psalm selection might seem a little odd, because we're going to read Psalm 23, which I usually read like at funerals and in hospital rooms. And you tend to think of through the valley of the shadow of death, or our translation will say the darkest valley. But as we close with it, I actually want you to listen for all the good times that are in this psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He lets me rest in grassy meadows. He leads me to restful waters. He keeps me alive. He guides me in proper paths for the sake of his good name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no danger because you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they protect me. You set a table for me right in front of my enemies. You bathe my head in oil. My cup is so full it spills over. Yes, goodness and faithful love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the Lord's house as long as I live. Amen.